Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما أما بعد. One time a man came to the Prophet ﷺ and he asked him, when is the day of judgment? This is in Medina, so the Prophet has already been asked this same question. Any teacher can relate to this. He's been asked this same question over and over and over and over and over. The way the Prophet responded, though, is absolutely incredible. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Quran itself documents different instances when people ask the Prophet, when is the day of judgment? Are we really going to come back to life after we turn into dust and bones and after we pass away and we're long forgotten? Are we really going to come back? The Prophet's been asked this many times, oftentimes disrespectfully. This man comes and he asks, as a Muslim, out of curiosity, but nonetheless, it's the same question. The Prophet's amazing, ﷺ. Instead of getting triggered and snapping at this person, he responded gracefully. And he responded in a way that was very practical. This man is asking a very theoretical question. When is the day of judgment? The Prophet responds, what have you prepared for it? Because at the end of the day, that's what really matters. It's not about when exactly is it going to be. What have you prepared for it? And he says, I don't have much in terms of prayer, fasting, charity. But I love Allah and His Messenger. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Prophet responds, not criticizing him, why don't you pray more? Why don't you fast more? Why don't you give more sadaqah? Do you know what I've been through to bring you this message? That wasn't his nature. That wasn't his character. Alayhi salatu wasalam. he responded by saying, you will be with who you love. You will be with who you love. Sayyidina Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu, as soon as the Prophet gets to Medina, his mother goes to the Prophet ﷺ. This teaches us how to think. She goes to the Prophet ﷺ and she says, I don't have much, but I have a son, he's going to serve you. What she's saying is, if I had more money, I'd give it to you. If I could have, I don't have much, but let me look at what I do have. How can I dedicate this to you? Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. She had a son. Son, now you're going to serve the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And Sayyidina Anas, later he would say, I served the Prophet for 10 years. 10 years. And not once did he tell me, why did you do this? Why didn't you do that? Alayhi salatu wasalam. You find the Prophet sending Anas on a little mission, go get something from the store basically. He's a kid. Along the way, there are other kids playing. He gets distracted. He joins them and starts playing. Some time passes. The Prophet comes looking for him because he didn't come back with what the Prophet needed. The Prophet finds him playing. And he lost the money. The Prophet just went and got it himself. This is the Anas who says, on that day, that was the happiest day for us as the companions of the Prophet. When the Prophet said, you will be with who you love, that was the happiest day for us. It brought us so much joy. Why? Because if there's one thing they could bank on, if there's one thing that was guaranteed for them in their hearts, in their condition, they knew for a fact, without a shadow of a doubt, they love Allah and His Messenger. This type of story should motivate us to want to take a step back and reflect internally. Who do I love the most and why? Who do I want to be like the most and why? Who do I prioritize and why? We live in an age where there's so much emphasis, especially by way of social media, there's so much emphasis on quantity. There's so much emphasis on fame. Yet it's amazing that you find people who they may have however much fame and get however much attention and however many likes and views and what have you, they're not satisfied. Their soul is not being fulfilled. It's thirsty. You find Hussein Abdullah, who's a retired NFL player, he mentioned that I would look around and see guys in the locker room and just on the team in general, and even if people had all these different things, which in and of itself, it's not about those things, but the point is those things aren't going to bring you satisfaction in your heart, in your soul. A big house, that's cool. It has its time and its place. Nice car, wonderful. That has its time and its place. But that's not the key to unlocking satisfaction in your heart and soul. That master key is loving Allah and His Messenger. When you love Allah and His Messenger, think about it. That's what the Prophet focused on. That's what he zoomed in on, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He didn't zoom in specifically on the man's prayer, fasting, charity. What he zoomed in on is priority number one. Because if you love Allah and His Messenger, aren't you going to be more motivated over time, little by little by little, to pray a little bit more, to give a little more charity, to fast a little bit more, to want to just do more good deeds, spend more time with the Quran, spend more time learning about the Prophet because you love him, alayhi salatu wasalam. And if we want our youth to love Allah and His Messenger, it's up to us as their elders for us to love Allah and His Messenger, because if we love the Prophet and we try, we understand the bar is high, alayhi salatu wasalam. But if we at least try and put in sincere, consistent effort for us to try to live that love that we claim for Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they see, our youth see us loving him, smiling like him, being kind and generous like him, alayhi salatu wasallam, that's what's going to reach their heart. When they see a type of embodiment in front of them that reflects the nur, the light of the Prophet ﷺ. So it's up to us as their teachers. It's up to us as their parents, as their aunties and uncles, elders, older siblings. We need to start with ourselves. I need to connect more with who the Prophet was, ﷺ, with the shama'il of the Prophet. Who was he? What was his personality? What was his character like? How did he look? And when you look at the vivid detail describing the Prophet ﷺ, the more you learn about him, the more you love him. Especially when you analyze his character more than anything else, ﷺ. If we want to pass the baton, especially in this country, of Islam to our youth, to the next generation, and then for them to be motivated to pass it to the next generation, the master key to unlock that has to be love for the Prophet ﷺ. It doesn't mean you can't love other things or love other people. That's fine. I love basketball. I love watching LeBron James play. I love watching Stephen Curry shoot. I can love these different things. But all of that combined is secondary. The Prophet is primary. The Prophet is number one. Everything else is number two. If the Prophet is number one for me, and I learn about him and I love his manners, والسلام, then that therefore impacts how I behave on the basketball court. Even if someone is talking smack to me, I'm not going to respond. That's not what the Prophet taught me, ﷺ. They might be saying this or saying that, or saying words they know they shouldn't be saying, but there's no teacher around, there are no grown-ups, whatever, who cares, this, that, and the other. I don't care. If you make that decision, that's up to you. I'm not doing that. I know who my role model is, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I know who I want to be with in Jannah. I know who I want to be next to on the Day of Judgment. It's up to me to put in a little bit of time to learn more about him. And the more you learn about him, the more you love him. Alayhi salatu wasalam. And the simplest sunnah that we can embody to start with is simply smiling. There's no question, I also taught in an Islamic school. There's no question you need to have ground rules, you need to have parameters, you need to have boundaries. There are going to be times you're going to tell the students, do this and don't do that, and by doing that, it doesn't mean you don't want to be like the Prophet. One of the reasons why the Prophet didn't nitpick at those things with Sayyidina Anas ibn Malik, the Prophet was very easygoing. He wasn't asking Sayyidina Anas to go do 1,000 things for him. The Prophet maintained most of his own chores. He fixed his own shoes, he patched up his own clothes, he not only took care of his own chores, he did extra chores around the home to help everyone else. In his nature, he wasn't going to go, he might ask Anas for something, and Anas did serve him, but the point is he didn't overburden him, there weren't many chances for Anas to let him down anyways. The Prophet didn't ask that much from him anyways. Alayhi salatu wasalam. So in addition to the ground rules, the parameters for the youth, your manners are the most important thing. You have to behave in the classroom, on the basketball court, the playground, whatever the scenario. It's not just about information. I know the 5 pillars. Okay, that's great. The main thing, the crown jewel, is your manners. Think of everything the Prophet taught us, everything the Prophet was sent with. And he said, I was only sent to perfect good character. Out of everything, what did he highlight more than anything else? Character. Who are the closest to him on the Day of Judgment? Character. What's heaviest in your scale of deeds? Character. Your manners. How does your knowledge influence your manners? So in addition to the ground rules and parameters and the structure that's needed, in addition to that, as teachers, we should smile. We should be kind. we should want to try to, it's hard, we should want to try to have this balance between we want to motivate our students to do more and to do better, and we also want them to feel safe in the classroom and in our presence, such that in between classes, before or after class, they feel comfortable enough to come to us and to say, hey, this is what happened at recess. Somebody was bullying me. They're not going to go to you as a teacher and to open up and be vulnerable if you never smile, if you're mean, if you're harsh, if you're... Let's take a step back. It's hard. One of the hardest things, first of all, to be a parent. I got kids too. Hardest job in the world. And I'm the dad. Like, mother, father. I know why. But then right after parenting is teaching. It's hard. But we have to strive. We do what we can. So there has to be effort on both ends. For the teachers to provide the framework and the structure, and to embody that love for the Prophet and that character, and for the students to meet them halfway, and for the students to also embody that character. Let's be motivated by our love for the Prophet. We ask Allah to motivate us to love the Prophet more, and we ask Allah to help us to live more like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, wa salamun ala al-mursalin, walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما صلى الله على محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. I want to conclude with, very quickly, the action items the Prophet mentioned when he arrived in Medina. This is the capstone to today's khutbah. The Prophet arrives in Medina. Let's take these lessons and live them because of our love for the Prophet ﷺ, and let's find ways to bring them to life in the classroom. He addresses the people. The first thing he says, Afshu salam, spread peace. With your words, with your actions, with your manners, with your character. The easiest connection to make in a school setting, no bullying. Spread peace. Feed people. وَأَطْعِمُ الطَّعَامِ وَصِلُ الْأَرْحَامِ, and family ties, social ties, connections. The reality is, for most of us, not all, but many of us living as Muslims in the US, a lot of the time, our extended family is the community. I didn't grow up with cousins. I grew up with the community. My classmates in Islamic school, in Quran class. In my life, functionally, they were like cousins. Some of them even closer. So when the Prophet is saying, وَصِلُ الْأَرْحَامِ, maintain family ties, layer one, family ties, blood relatives, siblings, parents, children, etc. But figuratively, when we reflect, maintain social ties, also with your Muslim brothers and sisters. If there's some kind of beef going on in whatever class, you got to squash it, you got to figure it out, you have to sort it out. The fourth thing, وَصَلُّوا بِاللَّيْلِ وَالنَّاسُ نِيَامٌ, and pray at night when people are sleeping. Let's reflect a little. Everyone wants to rush towards fame and this and social media. It's okay to be a little bit hidden. It's not about social media itself. Talk to your parents and your teachers. Sort that out in your own scenario. But the point is, everyone is going in this direction. It's okay to be a little bit different for the sake of Allah. Everyone is sleeping by a certain time. The Prophet is saying, be different, pray a little bit. Everybody wants to be famous. It's okay to be a little bit hidden. Do some good deeds that are hidden. Forget being famous with people. Humans are gonna human. Why do you want to be famous with humans? وَكَانَ الْإِنسَانُ أَكْثَرَ شَيْءٍ جَدَلًا. There's nothing, no creature more argumentative than human beings. That's who you want to be famous with. Instead, as Abdullah bin Mas'ud said, be famous fi sama, be famous with the angels and Allah. It's not about being famous on earth with people. Be famous in a far greater setting. Everyone is going in this direction. Be different for the sake of Allah. The result, تَدْخُلُ الْجَنَّةِ بِسَلَامٍ. Do these 4 things, you'll enter paradise in peace. The Prophet is teaching us that we have to do things if we want to show Allah that we genuinely want to make it to Jannah. The first thing he started with is to spread peace. Spread peace. We ask Allah to guide us and forgive us. We ask Allah to help us to embody these words as best we can. We ask Allah to not test us by them. We ask Allah to accept our efforts. We ask Allah to overlook our shortcomings. We ask Allah to unify our hearts. We ask Allah to sort out any problems that may be between any of us. We ask Allah to protect us from bullying and from being bullied. We ask Allah to protect us from both. We ask Allah from oppressing others and from being oppressed. We ask Allah to increase our love for the Prophet ﷺ, and we ask Allah to increase us in motivation for wanting to be more like him and to try to behave more like him as best we can. Ameen Rabbil Alameen. I'll conclude with this. The Prophet, he taught us a simple practice. He said, whoever supports an orphan will be like this with me in the hereafter. This is the only specific good deed where he gave us this type of result. There's a lot of encouragement for a lot of other good deeds, no question. But what's the specific one where he said, you'll be like this with me? Sponsoring an orphan. So imagine if somebody takes it further out of love for the Prophet. They don't want to sponsor one orphan, 2, 3, 5, 10, 100, whatever. It's not about the amount. That has its time and its place, but it's not really about that. A lady gave water to a dog, Allah forgave her, granted her Jannah. Nowadays, we would look at it, okay, well, maybe it was like 17 ounces of water, and it was in a shoe, not like a golden goblet. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't about that. She made the most of what she had. She did a small good deed sincerely, and she gets a one-way ticket to Jannah forever. خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا أَبَدًا. Once you get in, you're not going out. Why? Because of the sincerity, the ikhlas behind that small action. Now all of a sudden, so if I give $1, that could be my giving water to a dog? Maybe. But you have to give it to find out. We ask Allah to guide us and forgive us. We ask Allah to open our hearts and to fill our hearts with love for Allah and His Messenger. Ameen Rabbil Alameen. We ask Allah to protect our youth. We ask Allah to protect the next generation. We ask Allah to elevate you. We ask Allah to make it easy for you to lead us. We ask Allah to empower you. We ask Allah to bless all of your parents and teachers. We ask Allah to bless the administration. We ask Allah to bless the staff. We ask Allah to bless everyone who has ever contributed anything towards facilitating all of you being here now. Ameen Rabbil Alameen. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. أقم الصلاة.
حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
لا إله إلا الله. أقيموا صفوفكم واعتدلوا. Straighten the rows, fill in the gaps, complete the rows on your left, my right, inshallah, for starting on yourself. So, Allahu Akbar. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين